Hi, Black Cat Recapped here. Today I am going to explain a drama movie named A Dangerous Method. In 1907, in Zurich, Switzerland, there was a woman named Sabina Spielrein who was very upset. She was being held down by two men while they took her to the Bergossi clinic in a carriage. Sabina was screaming and yelling as they arrived at the institute. In one of the rooms, there was a psychiatrist named Carl Jung who introduced himself to Sabina. He told her that he was the one who brought her to the institute. Sabina, who looked very frightened, tried to tell him that she wasn't crazy, but her actions showed otherwise. Jung suggested that they talk every day for an hour or two to try and understand what was bothering her. Sabina tries to protect herself because she's afraid of getting hurt. Jung asks Sabina what causes her attacks. She continues by telling him that her father always gets angry with her. The next day, Sabina and Jung take a walk along a path in the forest. Sabina shares with him about her angel, a voice in her head that helps her anticipate what people will say before they say it. Jung thinks it would be a useful ability for her to have as a doctor. Sabina doesn't believe this dream will come true. As they venture deeper into the woods, Jung apologizes to Sabina and tells her that he will be away for some time to fulfill his mandatory military service. She complains angrily that it's a waste of time and has a breakdown, throwing her coat. Jung tries to calm her down. The next day, Sabina rebels and refuses to eat. Her nurse tries to talk with her, but when things become too overwhelming, she calls for Dr. Bueller. Bueller goes to Sabina's room to check on her, but finds no one in the room. Meanwhile, outside the institute, 3 staff members struggle to control Sabina. She splashes around in a dirty pond, refusing to come out. Bueller arrives and asks her if she has any hobbies that can keep her occupied. This prompts her to respond with the word death. She also tells them that she never wants to see Jung again. Left with no other option, the staff forcefully removes Sabina from the pond and carries her to the bathroom against her will, and wash her as she finally starts to calm down. A few weeks later, Jung comes back and visits Sabina in her room. He offers her a chance to learn about medicine by working with him on research. This offer makes Sabina stop feeling down and sparks her interest. To hide her excitement, she turns away from him. The next day, Jung has another session with Sabina. He asks her about her sleepless nights. She tells him that she can't sleep because she hears a presence, like a cat, whispering in her ear, but she doesn't understand it. She also mentions feeling a slimy sensation on her back. After a few minutes, Jung asks if she felt aroused when she felt the sliminess on her back. Sabina admits that she did, which leads her to realize that she actually enjoys pain. She then expresses that she should never be allowed to leave the institute. 2 years later, Emma and Jung travel to Vienna, Austria, to meet Freud. They take a carriage to Freud's home. Inside Freud's office, Jung discusses the effectiveness of psychoanalysis. Freud asks about Sabina's case and her treatment. Jung explains that her deep-rooted traumas contribute to her having unhealthy intimate tendencies. Freud remarks that this is a common situation among his patients. Later that day at the bar, Freud and Jung continue their conversation. Freud tells Jung that the intimate nature of his research is a problem and not acceptable to the public. He also mentions that his studies are being delayed due to the media potentially misrepresenting them. That night in Freud's office, Jung shares a dream he had about a horse being slowed down by a log, a carriage, and a rider. Freud interprets the horse as representing Jung himself and the things that are slowing him down, such as his wife, children, and future potential children. Regarding the log, Freud suggests that it may symbolize Jung's intimate thing as a symbol of fertility. Back in Switzerland, Jung meets up with Sabina and talks to her about his meeting with Freud. He expresses his belief that there is more to the study than just its intimate aspects. However, Sabina argues that Freud is right, and her own case proves it. A few days later, Otto Gross, a doctor who uses intimate methods in his research and is known for medicine use, is said to have been admitted to Bergotli. Along with his arrival, there is a letter from Freud instructing them not to release Otto until Freud takes charge of his case in October. At Jung's office, Jung attempts to interview Gross, who seems uninterested and claims that nothing is wrong with him. During the interview, Gross walks around the office and goes through Jung's things. He even steals some pills from Jung's drawer and scatters his mail around. That night, Otto and Jung smoke together and discuss their differing opinions. Otto tries to convince Jung that monogamy limits people's freedom. Jung argues that their job is to help and treat people, even bringing up the story of Otto's patient who took her own life without any regret or remorse in Otto's voice. Otto tells Jung that he merely gave her the release she desired. The next day, Jung meets up with Sabina by the bay. She tells him that opposites tend to attract, and that creativity comes with it. She then kisses him and offers to have intimate moments with him at her home anytime. The following day, Otto and Jung discuss Sabina's actions. Otto believes that Jung should indulge in her, and sees no harm in following his desires. Jung tries to resist and tells Otto that the more they talk, the more certain he becomes about his own methods and research. Otto argues that it's the opposite for him. The day after that, Jung meets with Sabina in his office. He confides in her about his concerns regarding Otto. He feels afraid that he's being influenced by Otto's words and worries that he might actually give in to his primal urges rather than relying on his rationality. Later that day, Jung goes to Otto's room upon hearing about his disappearance. In the messy room, he discovers a letter from Otto addressed to him. In the letter, Otto expresses gratitude to Jung for everything and advises him not to waste his own opportunities. He concludes the letter by asking Jung to inform his father of his death. That night, Jung goes to Sabina's home, finally giving in to his desires. They share an intimate night as soon as he enters the door. Afterward, Jung visits Sabina again. She kisses him, but he tries to stop her and earnestly tells her to end their affair. However, she doesn't listen and continues to try to seduce him. A few days later, Emma gives birth to Jung's first son, and Jung happily returns home to his family. Emma asks him if he'll remain with her now that they have a family. A few months later, Jung meets with Freud once again. Freud admits that it was a mistake to send Otto to Jung. However, Jung expresses his gratitude for the experience as it helped him become certain of his decisions. Freud then informs Jung that without Otto around, Jung is now the successor to his work. That night, Jung and Freud get into an argument. Jung suggests that there must be more to psychoanalysis than just the intimate aspect. He tries to make Freud understand that coincidences don't exist. Freud argues that their study is delicate and should only focus on scientifically based subjects. A few days later, Jung takes Freud on a boat ride. Freud brings up rumors about Jung and Sabina, but Jung denies the allegations. Freud reassures him that he also doesn't believe the rumors and has been telling others the same. The next day, Jung goes to meet with Sabina with the intention of ending their affair. Sabina pleads with Jung not to leave, but he is determined not to jeopardize his career. The next morning, while having breakfast, Emma asks Jung if he knows anything about the anonymous letters. He is shocked and freezes in response. Emma reveals that she knows Sabina wrote them, making it clear that she won't let him go without a fight. In the meantime, Sabina sends a letter to Freud, requesting a meeting. She believes it will be beneficial for both of them. Confused by the letter, Freud writes to Jung about it. Jung explains that the writer is Sabina, who may seek revenge against him for what happened. Jung warns Freud that Sabina is unpredictable and advises him to avoid getting involved. A few days later, Freud decides to respond to Sabina's letter. He expresses disbelief in her accusations against Jung and expresses his desire to stay out of their affair. He believes that whatever issues they have should be resolved between them alone. The following day, Sabina goes to Jung's office and finds him packing. She confronts him about the letter and urges him to tell the truth to Freud. She also asks to become Freud's patient, which he agrees to. A few nights later, on the ferry en route to America, Jung and Freud discuss a dream about a father who refuses to die. Freud deduces that the old man represents himself, creating an awkward situation. Freud hints at another dream he had but refuses to share the details. At Jung's home, Sabina arrives to deliver her dissertation, which was ordered by Freud. Sabina informs Jung that Freud believes her study should be included in his yearbook. They agree to work on it together, attempting to move past their past history. On the following Tuesday, they collaborate on her paperwork to publish it. They enjoy working together, falling back into their old habits of indulging each other. Later that day, Sabina shares her plan to leave Zurich after graduation. Jung begins to break down and finally confesses his feelings for her. 2 years later in Vienna, Freud praises Sabina's study but criticizes her for including religion in it. Sabina questions if that was the source of disagreement between Freud and Jung, but Freud denies it. He admits his mistake in considering Jung his successor. To change the topic, Freud offers 2 patients for Sabina to treat. In September, Jung initiates a conversation with Freud about their discussion on Akhenaten. He tries to explain that there may be deeper meaning to it, such as a son wanting to surpass his parent and move forward in life. Freud points out that this is why he wasn't credited in Jung's book. Jung clarifies that he omitted Freud's mention because he believes Freud is already famous and doesn't require further acknowledgement. A few moments later, the argument between the two continued until Freud suffered a stroke and collapsed to the ground. Thankfully, he survived it. Over the next few days, they exchanged letters, but not as friends or colleagues. Instead, they treated each other as opponents. They questioned each other's credibility, and eventually decided to go their separate ways, cutting each other out of their lives. A year later, Emma and Sabina had breakfast together. Emma expressed concern about her husband, who had become confused and sleepless. Upon hearing about Jung's deteriorating condition, Sabina hesitated but agreed to try to help. Afterward, Sabina sat with Jung by the riverside and attempted to reason with him. Jung shared his apocalyptic dreams of being washed away by a flood but avoided discussing their meaning. Instead, he inquired about Sabina's plans, and she casually mentioned her intention to return to Russia and become a psychiatrist there. However, Jung still harbored doubts and hatred towards Freud whenever he thought of him. Sabina reminded him that Freud's method, which he used in her treatment, had cured her. Suddenly, Jung confessed his regret for letting her go, realizing that she was the most important person in his life, as his love for her helped him understand his own identity. However, circumstances had changed, and they made the difficult decision to continue their separate paths. In the end, they pursued their own ambitions. Sabina became a respected trainer of distinguished analysts in the new Soviet Union, while Jung became the world's leading psychologist during the First World War.